Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Mahendra Reddy. I am working as an assistant professor in tourism at National Institute of Tourism and Hospitality Management. Now we are going to discuss about a paper on tourism in India and the module on culture and sustainable development. Before going to start the presentation, basically this particular paper is about the culture and the sustainable development. So in this particular paper we'll discuss like how the sustainable development is important in terms of culture and what is the role of culture. In previous modules we have discussed about the various forms of tourism and the different forms in terms of the alternative forms of tourism like a sustainable and responsible tourism, and now we are discussing this particular form because since the paper is mainly on the Indian culture and India is having rich culture and which is having the potential for the tourism development also. So apart from tourism, it is also playing very major role in sustainable development. In this particular context, so this module is having a different objectives. So the objective of this particular presentation is to know what culture and sustainable development is, and to know dimensions of sustainable development, principles of sustainable development, meaning of sustainable tourism, and what is the importance of culture in sustainable development, and contribution of culture to the sustainable development at the end. Okay, coming to the topic, basically before going to the cultural sustainability, I think it would be better to understand what exactly the culture is and what are the different forms of cultures and how the different forms mix or contributes for the tourism, even for the sustainable development. So in this connection, it would be better if we understand what exactly the meaning of culture is. So according to the World Commission on Culture and Development, the culture is defined as way of living together. Basically this particular definition says that the human beings and their way of livingness together, and the other one is the Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity has defined culture as the set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual and emotional features of society or a social group, and what it encompasses in addition to art and literature, lifestyles, way of living together, values, systems, traditions and beliefs. Culture is in different forms and styles. So here you can see different forms of culture. Culture is basically part of our heritage. Heritage is what we inherit from our past, is a heritage that is into again the culture and nature. The culture is basically again divided into different forms. So coming to this particular slide, culture is we can see it is into three different forms: the built culture, material culture and living culture. So if we go through individually a separate form of culture, first we will start with the built culture. Built culture is something which was built in the past for various reasons and still continuing, and it may be used for the tourism purpose or maybe for various other reasons also. Basically the construction of the building or the monument could be having various regions, but at the moment in the tourism point of view we are converting many monuments as a tourist attraction. Okay, coming to the built heritage, basically forts, palaces, religious buildings, other monuments are some of the examples that we can consider under the built heritage or the built culture. These are now tourist attractions, as I said in the introduction, throughout the world. Coming to the other form of culture is that living culture. Living culture is something which we inherited in the past and still continuing. So it consists of dance, music, fairs, festivals, religious practices and etc. So basically living culture is something which we inherited from the past generations and still we are continuing. The way of life, basically the traditions, the customs, the values, the belief systems, fairs, festival, dance, music, all this comes under the living culture. In this particular slide you can see There are various forms of culture, the popular the singers, the musicians, the dancers that you can see in this particular slide, and which they have contributed a lot for the living culture in Indian context. The other one is that the material culture. Material culture are basically the materials which we used in the past and still maybe showcasing for the tourism point of view, or maybe in the museums and all, comes under the material heritage. And this material culture are the examples are arts, crafts, archaeological excavations. Some material excavations comes under this particular example. Best example you can take of the museums are, if you take in Telangana and Andhra Pradesh, Shilparamam is the best example even for the material culture. Now coming to the the sustainable development. So we have all now we have discussed like what are the different forms of culture and what are the different areas, different forms are there in the culture, again like the traditions, the values, beliefs, monuments, and the materials and all. So now we are going to discuss about the sustainable development, because the topic is mainly about the culture and sustainable development. Sustainable development, in other module also we have discussed this to some extent, but in this module, we are discussing in a different context. So basically, sustainable development is having various definitions. According to the Brundtland reports, they mentioned in our common future report, it is defined as a development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is one definition given by the Brundtland Commission. The other definition also we can see that according to International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, defines sustainable development as improve the quality of life while living within the carrying capacity of ecosystem. So this particular definition is also having a lot of similarities with the first one. The only difference is that this particular definition mainly concentrates on environmental aspects, basically the ecosystem. And the sustainable development implies economic growth together with the protection of environmental equity, each reinforcing the other. And mainly it is balancing between the society, economy, and environment. Okay, now we understood that the basic meaning according to the definition, or in general also in sustainable development there will be three different dimensions, that the economic dimension, the society or the social dimension, and environmental dimension. And these three different dimensions should be equally balanced, then only there will be a positive development or the sustainable development. Okay, coming to the principles of sustainable development, according to the Rio Declaration on Environment and Development fleshes out the definition by listing 18 principles of sustainability, which concerns mainly the following. Now we are not going to discuss 18 different principles, but basically all these principles having the following meaning, or the following concentration. Basically the environmental protection, peace, crime and terrorism, gender equality, climate change, poverty, education, empowerment of the women. So these are some principles that we can see in the report. And the other one is sustainability principles, refers to the environmental, economic and socio-cultural aspects of the tourism. The plan of action emerged from the UN Conference on Environment and Development held in Rio in 1992. Basically, it is to make optimal use of environmental resources, conservation of natural heritage and biodiversity, respect the socio-cultural authenticity of host communities and conserve their built and living cultural heritage and the traditional values. And tourism, basically the sustainable tourism is that any tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic and social environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry and the environment and the host communities. So here you can see according to the definition and the principles, you might have observed that culture is one of the major aspect. So we can also understand that there are social, environmental and economic aspects. Sometimes the culture is considered under the social aspect of the development. But however, sometimes it is there is a need to consider the cultural aspect separately or as a separate dimension of the sustainable development, because in general culture plays a very major role in various aspects. Now that we are going to discuss in detail. What is the significance of cultural sustainability? That we'll discuss now. The world is not only facing economic, social or environmental challenges. Along with that, we are also having the problem of creativity, knowledge, diversity and beauty are the unavoidable basis for the dialogue for peace and progress. Values are intrinsically connected to human development and freedoms, and it comes from the culture. Culture contributes to inclusive economic development as a cultural heritage, cultural creative industries, and sustainable cultural tourism and cultural infrastructure are source of income generation and employment creation. So what is the importance of cultural sustainability? Basically, the cultural sustainability is important because culture contributes to inclusive social development for everyone. It also contributes to environmental sustainability, since the protection of cultural and biological diversity and the natural heritage is crucial to understand the development, while supporting traditional system of environmental protection and resource management can contribute to the increased sustainability of fragile ecosystems and the preservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, reducing land degradation and mitigation the effects of the climate change. So we have seen that in a different ways culture is very significant in a various forms, whatever the material culture or the living culture or the build culture, because generally any particular society or community is based on certain values, certain beliefs and certain the traditions, and these are different from one place to other place, because culture is diverse, because basically that region is very important, because to identify the different people or the different communities, the culture, different countries is based on the culture, and it also contributes a lot for the creative economies or the creative development, basically for the knowledge society. So all these things are possible because of the cultural development. Maybe in this context, like it can be considered as one of the major dimension for the sustainable development, along with socio-economic and environmental dimension. So coming to the role of the culture, what exactly the culture plays a role coming to the sustainable development. UNESCO report on the power of culture for development mentioned that the following are basically identified as a fundamental component of sustainable development. Culture as a sector of activity through different forms like build, material and living heritage, creative industries and various forms of artistic expressions. Culture is identified as a tool for socio-economic development and environmental protection. Culture is a source of identity, recognition, innovation and creativity. I have already mentioned all those things, I have discussed already. The other role is that culture is an evolving dynamic force for all societies, local and even at global level, influenced by and in turn influences the world, views and expressive forms. Culture is a renewable source if it is carefully nurtured for it to grow and flourish. When neglected, it is easily destroyed. Another way, culture is also used as a tool for the economic development. We have already discussed the social development, and maybe in other forms, even economy, in environment, in every different aspect, culture plays very major role. Coming to the economic aspect, the culture is a powerful global economic engine generating jobs and income with value of US $1.3 trillions in the year 2005. And the new report has to come, it is double what it was mentioned in the year 2005. And the global cultural industries account for more than 7% of the GDP. During the 90s, the cultural industries grew at an annual rate twice that of service industries and 4 times that of manufacturing in OECD countries. The other one is cultural tourism. Coming to the tourism, majority, especially in India, if you consider tourism, there are various forms and types. Especially in culture, it is having the tourism is having very rich potential, because the basic reason is that we are having the diverse culture, and this particular diversity is there, from place to place, or for every 100 kilometer in the country you can find, in terms of the change in the architecture, the food, the language, the clothing, all these things. These are become the attractions for the tourist, and these are contributing a lot for the economic development at the same time. So coming to the cultural tourism contributes a lot for the tourism development in the country. Basically, cultural tourism is 40% of the global tourism revenue, according to the UNWTO in the year 2007. Heritage, especially the UNESCO World Heritage Site, produces revenue from visits, sale of local crafts, music and cultural products, generating employment for communities. International tourism represents approximately 10% of the Europeans' GDP in the year 2004. So basically, we can understand, the culture plays very major role in attracting the tourist and provides economic benefits. The other one is culturally embedded livelihood practice help retain locals' knowledge and generate employment while enabling local economic development. This may vary from building to crops to agriculture and natural resource management. Cultural goods and services often need low capital investment by building on material and skill available within the community. The success of microcredit enterprises that benefit from women have been especially valuable. So these you can understand that the culture is having a various economic impacts also, because whatever, for example, if you take a cultural tourism industry in India, basically most of the times most of the places women is playing very major role, because most of the handicraft makers are the women and the sellers are the women. In that way, the women empowerment is there. In the other way also, women contributes a lot for the cultural development, especially for the agriculture development. Basically the organic farming or the traditional cultivation methods, in those areas women is contributing a lot for the culture. So in a way you can understand culture also contributes something for the women development and even for the economic development also. So the other one is that culture as a tool for economic development may be identified even at the institutions level, or maybe the organization level, if we develop the cultural infrastructure. Basically these are the universities, museums, cultural centers, cinema halls, theaters, craft centers and other such institutions are significant in generating of employment and revenue, because basically you can see some of the tourist destinations and even other the cultural centers, like as I mentioned, the theaters, music, the dance centers or the craft center, these are contributing a lot for the revenue generation or even for the employment generation for the local people in the destination region. And other things that culture also works as a tool for a social cohesion and stability, and mutual appreciation of diversity among cultures creates positive and constructive engagement and promotes dialogue, mutual understanding, knowledge, reconciliation and peace, which are essential for the sustainable development or for the social sustainability. In other way, we can see like a symbolic force of cultural heritage. Culture is also a wellspring of hope, enables deep sense of belongingness. In this case, you can see many examples. For example, India, basically Buddhist culture is evolved in India and spread to many other countries, and whenever we go to other Southeast and South Asian countries, that we can feel that whenever we meet those culturally similar people, we'll have a pride and the identity. These are some of the benefits that we'll have because of this cultural development. The other one is coming to the women empowerment. As I discussed earlier, women in local cultures carry the responsibility of interpreting cultural forms, practices and their meaning, as well as transmitting them to the new generations, creating an enabling environment to achieve the Millennium Developmental Goals by preventing conflict, building peace, protecting the right of women, marginalized groups, and intercultural dialogue can help for better conditions for achieving the MDGs or SDGs, basically the Millennium Developmental Goals and the Sustainable Developmental Goals. Culture is also one of the tools that we can use for environmental sustainability. Basically, the values and the belief system that we have, it shapes the relationship of the people and their natural environment and the way they manage and impact it. The cultural values, local knowledge, and the traditional practice of environmental management can be valuable resource towards achieving ecological sustainability. Biological and cultural diversity are intrinsically connected to a wide range of interactions between human and nature that are interdependent and mutually reinforcing. Accumulated traditional knowledge and the community practice of environmental management are fundamental to the sustainability and essential for the survival of the place and the people. Ecological challenges can be overcome. A variety of current environmental challenges such as depleting water resources, shrinking forest covers, and disappearing species are rooted in a disregard for the environment, may be addressed by positive practices embedded in a local culture that values a balance between the nature and the human world. These are the things that we can expect generally the economic, environmental, and social benefits. For this, there are various strategies that throughout the world the different organizations are following. Basically, coming to the Global Alliance is one of them, and Global Alliance for a Cultural Diversity. And according to this, alliance is intended to create a partnership between private, public, and civil society to strengthen local cultural industries for the development, among which the World Heritage Site concept is one. In the framework of the World Heritage Convention, UNESCO conducts a large array of programs and projects that foster local development throughout the world. These range from environmental protection, basically the biodiversity conservation, forest and marine areas conservation, and small island conservation, to historic urban landscape, cultural tourism, ecotourism, and the cultural heritage conservation. Other impacts of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites also can be seen in this regard. The other one we have already discussed in the initial slide, that Millennium Developmental Goals Fund. Basically this is one of the area where the culture is also considered as a tool, or maybe one of the goal. Basically through Millennium Developmental Goals also we can overcome some issues related to the culture, and culture also in reverse it contributes for the development. We have discussed various forms of the culture and sustainable development, role of culture in sustainable development. With this, we can summarize this. Culture is important in the process of social and economic development. Socially, it provides and for the continuity of way of life that people in a region or a country see a significant to personal and group identity. Economically, it various forms of cultural expressions such as music, dance, literature, sports, and theatre provides employment as well as enjoyment for many people. Employment is also generated through the restoration and preservation of the cultural heritage centers and sites, both for education and tourism. In this context, culture is identified as a major tool and the dimension for the sustainable development, and considered as the fourth pillar for the dimension of the sustainable development. Basically, we can conclude that culture is having different forms. Basically, the living form, the built form, material forms, which consist of the traditions, the values, the belief systems, the way of life, and basically the built heritage consists of the monuments, architecture styles, the religious buildings. It includes many other forms of the buildings. Even the material heritage is also one of the form of the culture, which includes the material crafts, or basically the examples are the museums and the art galleries or the heritage centers, basically the craft centers and all. And culture is having the rich diversity in India. This particular diversity contributes a lot for the development in a various aspects. So basically the cultural tourism also among one, where we can see that there is a lot of scope for the cultural tourism. In cultural tourism we can see all these different monuments and the traditions, all these the value system, the beliefs, basically the religious practices and all. And these are basically part of the culture. The other thing is that sustainable development. In other slides also we have discussed about sustainable development. Sustainable development is basically about not only thinking and working about the present generation, it also about thinking about the future generations and acting at the present moment to think about the future generations for their life. So in this context there are various dimensions of the sustainable development, like the economic dimension, the social dimension and environmental dimension, and each dimension is contributing something to the sustainable development, and these should be managed in a same manner. Then there will be a possibility for the sustainable development. So in this connection we can see that culture is also contributing directly or indirectly a lot for the sustainable development, for the economic development, for the social development, even in the environmental conservation or the development, culture is contributing a lot. So maybe we have seen many impacts because of the culture, maybe in coming to the women empowerment or the economic development or the social development or a value system or the value education and all. So these can be possible, and if we add in this context, maybe if the culture is added as a separate dimension or the fourth pillar or the fourth dimension of the sustainable development, there will be a possibility for more sustainable manner development. And in this context, culture we can consider that as a major tool for contributing a lot for the socio-economic and environmental development. Thank you. For more information, please visit e-text and other references which are mentioned on the website.